The sound of gravel crunching under her tires brought a wave of nostalgia and unease as Emma Hayes pulled into the driveway of the old two-story brick house. Her eyes drifted over the familiar wraparound porch, now slightly worn, the swing on, the far end swaying gently in the Oklahoma breeze. A lump rose in her throat. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Harold Hayes, had spent decades serving his country, tours in Afghanistan, Iraq, and beyond. But it was a fall from a ladder in his backyard that finally brought him down. Emma stepped out of her truck, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Her army fatigue still bore the dust of Fort Sill, where she'd recently been discharged. She had come home to care for the man who'd raised her when her own parents had vanished into their own lives. The smell of honeysuckle and fresh cut grass hit her like a memory, until she noticed the garish sign posted in the front yard. Property in violation. HoA notice issued. Emma frowned. That hadn't been there a week ago. Before she could investigate, a prim and sharply dressed woman approached from across the street. Clipboards and condescension were her weapons of choice. "Hello there," the woman said, voice overly bright. "You must be Emma. I'm Karen Mitchell, president of the Willow Creek HoA. I noticed you parked a non-compliant vehicle in the driveway. Also, your grandfather's yard has not met community standards since his injury." Emma bristled. "Hi, Karen. I just got back. Give me some time to settle in." Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We operate under a strict timeline here. I've already issued 3 citations for lawn length, and the unauthorized flagpole he installed last year is a Class B violation. I'm sure you understand. It's about property values." Emma's jaw tightened. Her grandfather's flagpole wasn't just metal. It held his old unit's banner and the American flag he fought for. "Right," Emma muttered, barely keeping her tone civil. "I'll look into it." Karen's heels clicked away, but Emma felt the weight of the HoA's invisible chains tightening already. This wasn't the neighborhood she remembered. It was a battlefield dressed in manicured lawns and phony smiles. 2 days later, Emma woke early to begin trimming the overgrown hedges. She wanted no excuse for HoA harassment. As she filled a wheelbarrow with clippings, her eye caught movement. Near the front flagpole, Karen, flanked by 2 HoA board members, stood inspecting the structure like drill instructors on inspection day. "Can I help you?" Emma called out, wiping sweat from her brow. Karen turned with the air of someone used to authority. "We've received multiple complaints. That flagpole exceeds the height restriction by 18 inches. More importantly, it flies an unauthorized symbol." Emma walked toward them, noting the veterans' unit flag fluttering beneath the stars and stripes. "That unauthorized symbol is my grandfather's division banner. He earned the right to fly it," she said flatly. Karen gestured to her clipboard. "Willow Creek guidelines prohibit non-standard flags. Military or not, the regulation is clear. Failure to remove it within 48 hours will result in a $500 fine." Emma's blood boiled. "That's not just a piece of cloth. He served 3 tours overseas. He can barely walk now, but that flag gives him pride." Karen shrugged. "I respect the military, of course, but rules are rules. We can't make exceptions." Emma took a step closer, her voice low and controlled. "Let me be very clear. That flag isn't coming down. You want it removed, bring a ladder and try it yourself." The board members shifted uncomfortably, but Karen's face remained cold. "Then I'll see you at the next violation hearing. Good day, Ms. Hayes." As they walked away, Emma turned to her grandfather, who had been watching silently from the porch. He gave her a small, proud nod. "You got more backbone than most officers I ever served under," he muttered. Later that week, Emma came home from a pharmacy run to find yet another notice taped to the front door. This one was a formal complaint listing no fewer than 6 aesthetic violations, including a non-conforming vehicle, her truck, unauthorized military items stored outdoors, her gear bag, unsightly wheelchair ramp, installed without permit, she tore the paper down and marched into the living room where Harold was watching the news. Third notice this week. Now they're complaining about your damn ramp. Her grandfather didn't look away from the screen. They're mad because you don't fold. Emma exhaled slowly, pacing. This is targeted. That ramp came in last year when your VA nurse recommended it. No one said a word then. Harold turned to her. Karen wasn't HoA president back then. Her husband used to run it. Died of a heart attack last spring. Since she took over, it's been like a damn boot camp. Only nobody voted. For her. Emma glanced out the window, watching a patrol golf cart roll slowly past the house. Two elderly men stared at her driveway, as if assessing it for battle damage. She's using the HoA to make life miserable for anyone she doesn't like. She don't like veterans. You mark my words, Harold said. Every flag, every ramp, every scar reminds her she ain't in charge of us. Emma nodded grimly. Then it's time we reminded her what resilience looks like. The more Emma pushed back against the HoA, the more she learned from the neighborhood's quieter corners. One evening, while walking her grandfather's old shepherd dog, she stopped by the mailbox cluster and struck up a conversation with Mrs. Lenora Vickers, a retired nurse with a penchant for strong coffee and stronger opinions. "You're Harold's granddaughter, aren't you?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. I remember when you were just a little thing chasing frogs in that creek." Her eyes softened, then darkened. "Shame about what Karen's doing." Emma leaned against the metal post. "She's trying to fine us into submission." Lenora sighed. "She did the same thing to Mark and Julia Peterson. Mark served in desert, storm, had PTSD, walked with a cane. Karen said the wind chimes on their porch were unapproved noisemakers. Then it was their garden. Then the wheelchair lift. What happened to them? They left. Sold the house at a loss. Couldn't take the harassment. Karen told the board she was restoring order. That was her phrase. Emma clenched her fists. This isn't about order. It's control. You're not wrong, Lenora said. And you're the first one who's fought back. Just be careful. She knows how to twist things. Emma stared at the Petersons' old house, now meticulously landscaped with a "for lease" sign in front. They're not the last, she murmured. Not if I don't do something. That night, Emma sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, a pot of coffee steaming beside her, and a notepad full of violation codes. She'd spoken to an attorney from the VA legal hotline, who'd confirmed what she suspected. Karen's actions bordered on discrimination. She navigated to the county ADA office's website and began drafting her complaint. To whom it may concern, she wrote, I am filing a formal complaint against the Willow Creek Homeowners Association for the targeted harassment and discrimination of a disabled veteran residing at address. She detailed the citations against her grandfather's mobility ramp, the threats over the flagpole, and the pattern of behavior against veterans in the community. She attached photographs, citation copies, and included quotes from neighbors. When she hit submit, her hands trembled, but not from fear. Her phone buzzed moments later. Grandpa Harold, you still awake? She smiled and texted back. Emma, just declared war on Karen. Hope you don't mind. Harold, about damn time. Lock and load. As she shut the laptop, the weight in her chest lifted a little. For once, she wasn't just reacting, she was fighting back. And this time, the enemy wasn't overseas. It was a smiling tyrant in heels, and Emma wasn't going to let her win. The morning sun hadn't yet broken over Willow Creek when Emma was jolted awake by the shrill bark of her grandfather's dog, Thor. Boots hitting hardwood, she rushed down the stairs, heart pounding. As she flung open the front door, the low rumble of a diesel engine greeted her ears. A tow truck was backing into the driveway, its flatbed tilted, steel chains clanking. Emma's truck, parked neatly along the gravel edge, was the clear target. Hey, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she yelled, sprinting outside in sweatpants and a t-shirt. The driver, a lanky man with oil-streaked hands and a clipboard, didn't flinch. "Work order from the Willow Creek HoA, he said blandly. "Non-compliant vehicle. Doesn't meet neighborhood standards." Emma stepped between him and the truck. "This vehicle is registered, insured, and parked off the street. You're not laying a single finger on it." The man held up the order. "They said it's a commercial vehicle. Military decal, toolbox, antenna. Violates Aesthetic Code 12C. You want to take it up with your HoA." Emma's eyes narrowed. "I am taking it up, right now." Behind her the porch light flicked on. Harold stepped out slowly, leaning on his cane, grimacing at the chill. "You all right, kiddo?" "I've got it, Grandpa," she called without looking back. She grabbed her phone, snapping photos of the truck, the plate, the tow truck, and the driver's paperwork. Then she placed a call to the sheriff's non-emergency number. "Let me make this simple," she said to the driver. "If you so much as touch this truck, I'll have you charged with attempted theft and trespassing. I've filed an ADA complaint against your boss, and trust me, this will not look good." The driver hesitated. "Look, lady, I'm just doing what the paper says." "Then go tell Karen Mitchell she can explain to the county why she's trying to tow a military veteran's vehicle under false pretenses." After a tense pause, the driver muttered a curse, lowered the flatbed, and drove off. Inside, Harold chuckled softly. "That's my girl." But Emma's smile was short-lived. This wasn't just about fines anymore. Karen was playing dirty, and next time she might not send a warning. A week after the tow truck incident, Emma sent out discreet text messages and slipped paper invitations into mailboxes, not to the whole neighborhood, just to those who had spoken up or seemed sympathetic. "Coffee and courage," the invite read. "Come share your story. We're stronger together." That Saturday morning, a dozen people gathered in Emma's backyard. Folding chairs were arranged in a wide circle under the oak trees. A percolator brewed black coffee. Emma stood with a clipboard in hand, nervous but resolute. Mrs. Vickers arrived first, wrapped in a shawl. Then came Carl, a retired police officer with a limp and a deep voice. Next were the Ramirez family, whose teenage son used a wheelchair, and who had also received violation notices for their ramp. A few others trickled in, silent victims of HoA pettiness. Emma opened the meeting simply. "I know I'm new to this fight, but it's clear my grandfather and I aren't the only targets. If you've experienced what Karen calls enforcement, I want to hear it." Carl cleared his throat. "She fined me $800 for having a Blue Lives Matter flag on my porch. Claimed it was political signage." Mrs. Vickers added, "She tried to block my porch lift install last year. Called it a liability risk because it didn't match the fencing." The Ramirez mother, eyes tired and voice shaking, said, "She told us our son's therapy swing violated uniformity codes. We just took it down. We didn't have the energy to fight." Emma nodded, writing every word. "You all deserve better. This isn't just bad management. It's abuse of power. I've already filed an ADA complaint. But if we stand together, she can't pick us off one by one." The quiet murmurs turned into nods of agreement. Carl leaned forward. "What do you propose?" Emma raised her eyes. "We document everything. Every letter, every fine, every time she harasses someone. And when the county comes knocking, we make sure they know it's not just about a ramp or a flag. It's about a bully hiding behind bureaucracy." Midway through the meeting, just as Carl was finishing a story about Karen calling animal control on his therapy dog, a sharp voice pierced the calm. "Well, well, well. I see we're hosting an unpermitted gathering." Emma turned to find Karen Mitchell standing just inside the fence line, flanked by a younger HoA board member and armed with her omnipresent clipboard. She wore sunglasses and a tight-lipped smile that reeked of false civility. "This is a private event," Emma said, stepping forward. In my backyard, on private property. Karen strode closer. More than 3 unrelated households constitute a neighborhood assembly, which under Willow Creek guidelines requires pre-approval and permits for safety compliance. Someone in the circle groaned audibly. Emma folded her arms. You going to fine us for drinking coffee now? Karen's smile vanished. Don't test me, Ms. Hayes. I have every right to enforce the HoA charter. And your little rebellion here is dangerously close to inciting disruption. Carl stood up. Lady, we're drinking coffee and talking. You want to call the fire marshal on us too? Karen turned toward him. Mr. Dawson, as you know, your fence remains 6 inches above the allowed height. Emma stepped forward, voice calm but cutting. This meeting isn't about fences or permits. It's about you using your position to intimidate veterans, disabled residents, and families just trying to live in peace. Karen's nostrils flared. Careful, Ms. Hayes. You may have some military experience, but this is a community. Civilians play by different rules. Emma's voice turned cold. So do tyrants, and their rules don't last forever. Karen's face tightened. She turned, heels crunching on gravel as she stormed off. You'll be hearing from the compliance office. As the group fell silent, Mrs. Vickers muttered, I hope she hears from the state first. A week later, Emma sat at her kitchen table again. But this time her laptop screen displayed a Zoom call with Lena McGrady, a state ADA compliance officer from the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. Ms. Hayes, thank you for your complaint, Lena began. We've reviewed your submission and determined it falls within our enforcement authority. I'd like to conduct a preliminary interview and request supporting documentation. Emma nodded, pushing forward a thick folder labeled Karen Mitchell, HoA Abuse. She had been meticulous, scanning every notice, photographing ramp, measurements, timestamps, witness names. She emailed the folder contents as Lena walked her through the official protocol. This isn't the first complaint against an HoA in this county, Lena explained. But it is the first with this level of documentation and involving multiple disabled individuals. If even half of this is accurate, your HoA is in serious violation of the Fair Housing Act and ADA protections. Emma leaned back. She's not just discriminating, she's running a dictatorship. Veterans, disabled kids, elderly residents. She targets anyone who can't fight back. Lena's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. She picked the wrong person this time. Before ending the call, Lena promised to dispatch a field investigator within 2 weeks. If necessary, state-level enforcement would follow. After the meeting, Emma stepped onto the porch where Harold was fixing a loose rail. Well? He asked. Emma's grin said it all. She's officially under investigation, Harold chuckled. Now that's the kind of airstrike I like. Days later, the retaliations came like a snakebite, quick, venomous, and underhanded. A formal letter arrived, certified and stamped with the HoA seal. Emma tore it open and read aloud. Notice of pending compliance action. Due to repeated acts of hostility, unauthorized gatherings, and endangerment to the neighborhood's tranquility, this board moves to revoke occupancy rights under Bylaw 8A for the resident at address. Effective in 30 days, pending final vote. Harold sat silently, staring at the television but seeing none of it. They're trying to evict us? Emma's voice was a mix of disbelief and fury. She scanned the bylaw Karen cited. It was an old, poorly worded clause about community, disruptors, and sustained non-compliance. Vague enough to twist, specific enough to weaponize. Emma grabbed her phone. I'm calling Lena. This just crossed from harassment into outright retaliation. But even as she spoke, a second wave of fear settled in. If the board voted, and Karen convinced her cronies to pass it, they could actually initiate legal proceedings to remove Harold from his own home, the one he built after his final deployment, the one with the porch he designed for Emma when she was 5. Emma paced the room, the fight now more personal than ever. "They want war," she whispered. "Then let's give them one." Emma had dealt with difficult people before, in combat zones, on foreign bases, and in command. But Karen Mitchell was something different. Relentless, manipulative, and now dangerous. When the eviction notice arrived, Harold didn't speak. For a full hour. He just sat on the porch, eyes locked on the ramp Emma had built. His shoulders sagged, his lips pressed into a thin line. That evening, after dinner sat untouched on their plates, Emma opened her laptop and began compiling everything. Phone calls, notes, notices, the tow attempt, the forced HoA inspections, all of it. And then she did something she never thought she'd have to do in small-town Oklahoma. She filed for a restraining order. At the courthouse the next morning, Emma stood before a judge, honorably discharged, decorated, and visibly angry. She presented photos, official ADA documentation, copies of Karen's notices, and written testimonies from neighbors. She didn't ask for much. Just a simple court-enforced boundary. Karen Mitchell was not to approach Harold or their property. Again, she's exploiting vague bylaws and turning this entire community into a battleground, Emma told the judge. "My grandfather's a veteran. He's 87. And this is how she treats him?" The judge nodded solemnly. "Temporary protective order granted. We'll hear the full case in 10 days. Later that day, a sheriff's deputy delivered the notice to Karen's porch. Emma watched from inside as Karen snatched the envelope, read it, and turned beet red. But this time, she didn't march over or threaten retaliation. She just stood there, trembling with rage, her world finally bending to someone else's authority. The next morning, something subtle but powerful began to happen. First, it was a small yellow ribbon tied to the fence post at the end of Emma and Harold's driveway. Then a handmade sign reading, "We stand with our veterans," appeared near their mailbox. By noon, 5 more signs dotted the edge of their property. Simple messages, handwritten or painted, declaring solidarity. Justice for Harold. Emma's our voice. Enough is enough. Children from the Ramirez family snuck up with crayons and placed a bouquet of paper flowers in the front planter. Emma stood on the porch and watched as Carl from down the road nailed a small American flag to her fence post, his limp slowing him but not stopping him. "They may not speak up in meetings," he said, "but people are watching, and they're choosing sides." Harold moved beyond words, simply placed his hand over his heart and nodded. Word spread fast. Karen's grip on the neighborhood weakened. No one wanted to be seen as siding with her anymore. Not with the investigation underway, the restraining order public, and the quiet dignity of Harold's story changing hearts. Emma knew then. They weren't just defending themselves. They were showing everyone what courage looked like. And even the most passive neighbors were starting to find their voices. The next attack came in a chilling and dangerous form. On a humid Monday afternoon, Emma was doing laundry when she noticed Harold's breathing had grown more labored than usual. His oxygen tank was nearly empty, refill due that morning, but the usual delivery truck hadn't shown. Emma called the supplier. The receptionist sounded confused. "We sent a truck, but the HoA rep turned our driver away at the gate, said, 'Your street was under non-essential delivery restriction due to an infrastructure upgrade.'" Emma's blood froze. She sprinted to the garage and grabbed the backup tank, hooking it up with steady hands even as her heart raced. It would only last 12 hours. Without waiting for permission, she jumped in her truck and drove straight to the community's front gate. There she found one of Karen's loyalists, a smug young man named Brad, holding a clipboard. "Delivery restriction," he said smugly when she demanded answers. "Safety measure during sidewalk reconstruction. Only pre-approved vehicles allowed." Emma stepped out of her truck, eyes cold as steel. "You refused entry to a medical delivery? Hey, I just follow orders." Emma didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She pulled out her phone, hit record, and asked him to repeat what he'd said. He did. And then she said clearly, "You just admitted to obstructing medical assistance to a disabled veteran. That's felony territory." His smirk vanished. She posted the video online. By evening, it had thousands of views. People weren't just angry anymore. They were furious. Karen's vendetta had crossed into cruelty, and the whole county was, watching. The next day, Emma stood before a news camera in the shade of her grandfather's porch. The reporter, a woman named Dana Hartman from Channel 8, had heard about the restraining order and the viral delivery video. Now she was giving Emma a platform. "My name is Emma Hayes," she began. "I served 2 tours overseas. I came home to take care of my grandfather, a decorated veteran, and found that the real battle wasn't in another country. It was right here, against a woman using HoA power to abuse her neighbors." She detailed the ADA violations, the harassment, the fines, the attempt to evict Harold, the withholding of medical services. Dana listened carefully. "You say this is part of a broader pattern?" Emma nodded. "We have testimony from at least a dozen other residents. Elderly, disabled veterans. Karen Mitchell doesn't represent a community. She runs a personal fiefdom." The piece aired that night, and it hit like a thunderclap. Viewers flooded the station's inbox with outrage. Former HoA residents from other towns came forward with similar stories. Civil rights attorneys took interest. A state representative issued a statement within hours, promising legislative review of HoA abuses. Karen had silenced her victims with paperwork and intimidation. But Emma had broken the silence. Now the world was watching. 3 days after the news interview aired, the final blow landed. A state vehicle pulled into Willow Creek. 2 plainclothes investigators stepped out and approached Karen's home, a stack of paperwork in hand. Karen, ever the showman, tried to meet them at the curb with her clipboard and affected smile. But this time it didn't work. She was handed a thick folder, a formal complaint from the Oklahoma Department of Human Services. Multiple violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Harassment, retaliation, obstruction of medical access, and perhaps most importantly, a cease and desist order. Effective immediately, Karen Mitchell and the Willow Creek HoA were barred from issuing any enforcement actions, levying any fines, or contacting residents under the authority of their charter. Emma: "Got the news from Lena directly. We're pursuing civil penalties, possibly criminal charges if further obstruction is confirmed," Lena said. "And the community charter will undergo full legal review." Emma relayed the news to Harold, who simply closed his eyes and nodded, exhaling a breath he'd held for weeks. That evening, neighbors gathered quietly on their porches. Candles were lit. A few flags were raised. Carl brought over a homemade cake that read, "Justice Served," and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt like home again. Emma stood beside Harold on the porch, holding his hand as the stars blinked overhead. They didn't need a victory parade. They just needed peace. And now finally it had come.